So I've shown you how you can use the blanket stitch as a hemming stitch. That is what it was originally used for, but you can also use it, of course, as a proper embroidery stitch. So now we're going to stitch on the fabric itself. And I like to use an embroidery hoop. You don't have to if you don't like working in a hoop. It's perfectly okay to do without, but I feel it helps me to control the tension of my stitches. So I'm going to place the inner ring that I've covered with cotton ribbon, and that I do that in order not to damage my fabric, and that doesn't matter for this fabric very much because this is a sturdy hemp fabric. But for thinner fabrics like silk, it can be good to have your inner ring covered with ribbon and protect your fabric a little bit better. So I put the outer ring over it. And put a bit on the fabric all around. And then tighten the screw. So, and I have my needle and I still had a bit of orange thread that I'm going to use. And I could start just like I did on this edge by tying a knot in my thread, and that's perfectly okay. And it's by far the easiest way to start. But as promised, I would like to show you another way to start, and a way that you do not have a knot, and that can be practical with thin or opaque fabrics. And for instance, when you're embroidering on a piece of clothing that you are wearing close to your skin and you don't like feeling the knots in the thread. So what you then do is you make a knot like this. I'm making a loop, picking up the tail, and now I have a loop like that. And this is the kind of loop that if I pull on this side, it will disappear again. And important is that I turn the loop like this. So I start from back to front and then turn my finger, pick up the tail and make a loop like that, so that now when I pull on it, I can undo the loop from the knot from this side. When I would do it otherwise, going from first from front to back and then turning my finger, and then that's a difficult one for me, like this. Yeah, that would actually work too, but the other one works better. It's smoother to undo the knot. So I make a knot like this, and I go down at some place, not the place where I was. Suppose I want to start here, about here. Then I go down here, from the front to the back. And then come up at the place where I want to start here. So now I have this rather long tail. Doesn't have to be all that long, but it's easier to show you now. And now I start stitching, and later on I will undo this knot and finish off the thread on the back side. I'll show you later. But first now the blanket stitch. As you remember, we did a stitch first to get a closed row to start with. It's not necessary, you can do whatever you like, but I'll show you with stitching on the fabric. It's a little easier. You just make a horizontal stitch like this and come up at the exact same spot where you came up first. Pull the thread through, and that's your first stitch. That's just for making a closed row. And now we can start making the blanket stitches, and first going to do the classical normal blanket stitch that is just about square. So I'm going down here and coming up here, and the thread is always behind the needle. And when I pull through, you get that typical angular shape of the blanket stitch. So a couple more, going down, coming up, thread behind the needle, and pulling through. And here again, pulling on the thread until it looks nice and smooth. So not too loose. Too loose would look like this, and then you would get a loopy stitch look. But you shouldn't also not pull too hard, because then you would make the fabric pucker and you would get big holes where you have inserted your needle. So a medium tension on the stitches. And let's do a whole row of these, just starting at the top, working to the bottom, more or less a vertical line. And the stitches have more or less the same shape. They're more or less square, have a square shape. I'm not such a very neat stitcher, so it's not perfect. That's okay. So now that we've made a row of stitches, when you've done this movement, here I'm like 12 times or something like that, you might get that your thread is turning and twisting. And what you can do then, difficult to show now in the video, is that let the thread hang and undo the twists, and then you can continue. But I think for now this is long enough, and I would like to show you how you can end a row. You go down just outside of the corner of this last stitch, just outside, and you go to the back. So here you have a very tiny stitch, and then I turn to the back, and now you see this is how it looks at the back side. A row of stitches, horizontal stitches, and now I can finish my thread by going under these stitches. Now they are rather big stitches, so perhaps I could say, well, the thread isn't fixated enough. Depends a bit. If your stitches would be a little smaller, they might be fixated enough, and I think that it would be okay to finish your thread like this. But if you are doubting and you don't want your thread to come loose again, you can also do a loop around that first stitch, pull, and then you have a little knot there, and then go under a couple of stitches, and then you can cut your thread. Now we still have the beginning of the row, the beginning of the thread. So now I'm pulling on this knot and it's loose, and I can go to the back, pick up the thread here, and finish it off by going under, tucking it under here. And now you have a very smooth backside. If that's important for you, as I said, could be important with thinner fabrics or with clothing, you can start like that.